Hello and welcome everyone, it is me, Zabal, also known as the Potato, is back for you with another video. It's been a minute, glad that I still got the intro down. Did want to take a minute to talk about the Pumpking stuff after like a bit of testing, mainly just test hands where I'm kind of at with theory, and funny enough, through the help of one of the people under the community post, I did reach like a list where I was like very happy with. So like I'm just jumping the gun, kind of talking about these cards because I do quite like these. That's why we're starting on, the greatest site for Yu-Gi-Oh! Information, which is the YG organization site. With the database reveals from Maze of Muertos. I believe this set comes out in like 2 weeks' time. So let's just get into those, then we'll swap over to the Deutsche Bahn website and look at the deck list, maybe show a couple combos, and then we'll wrap this one up. But yeah, we're starting here at the top with the big man himself. Pumpking, the King of Grave Ghosts, is a 6 dark zombie effect. 1950-26 as the stat line. Can reveal this guy in your hand to set a Call of the Haunted from deck or grave, and if you do, you discard a card, and that set card can be activated this turn. Already, a great start. We're taking an old-ass card and doing a whole-ass archetype around it. This worked very well with Mystical Space Typhoon. And I think is working very well with what is to happen here. Because if this guy is special summoned, you can special summon a 6 zombie from your deck except a monster with 1950 attack, and you're locked to summoning a zombie. You're locked from special summoning zombies, non-zombies from hand or graveyard for the rest of this turn. Already, great start. You reveal this guy, set the Call of the Haunted, can discard this card. The Call of the Haunted, since it can be activated immediately, gets this guy back. And you're able to summon another 6 zombie from the deck, which is, pretty promising. Has a lot of good, like, even generic targets. Something like Jiangshi the Spiridar was like a pretty decent card if you have like ways to banish that to have an additional body later in the line. But let's keep it moving for now. Army of the Haunted is like a very simple card here. It's a 6 dark zombie effect, 2400 attack, 0 defense. While you control, if you control, excuse me, Call to Haunted, and this is in your hand or grave, you can special this card, and if it's sent to grave, you can target a Call to Haunted in your grave, set it. You can only use each effect of Army of the Haunted once that turn. Solid extender. This is kind of neat for some of the like synchro lines this deck has access to, or like the list has access to it. I'm going to showcase later. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, it's a fairly functional extender. Nothing crazy about this card. There's another good card, Stare of the Snakehair, which also kind of sets up what this deck wants to do very nicely. And this is a 6 dark zombie effect, 1500, 1200, just like the vanilla Snakehair this is based on. You can discard this card to add a Call of the Haunted or a spell trap that mentions it from deck to hand. And if this is special, you can target an attack position monster your opponent controls. That face-up monster can't attack, has its effects negated, and can be used for any type of extra deck summon. Very promising effect, not only a great bit of consistency here, but the on-summon effect kind of sets up what you want to do. You're basically getting like most of these cards into rotation, getting them in the graveyard, want to revive them off of Call of the Haunted or, other revival effects. And then get disruption off of that. Pumpking technically also gives you value, which is very nice. But I think that's just a cool thematic thing for zombies to do. And why I'm kind of thinking this could be something as like even, maybe not as the best thing in the room to be playing, but similar to, I like to draw the comparison to Odeon, Apophis, Tombkeeper, however you want to refer to that deck. Where it's just a solid like control strategy, very heavy on the hand traps, that has like a good grind game, wants to play that resource game, and is very, very good at it. Which, kind of why I'm fairly interested in these cards. Then we have the Great Mammoth of the Nether World is another 6 dark zombie effect, has 2200 attack and 1800 defense, and if it's special and you control Call of the Haunted or a zombie monster, except another copy of itself, you can target a card on the field and destroy it. Again, you want to be summoning this back on the opponent's turn off of, Call of the Haunted, pop a card on the field. Pretty simple. An Xyz monster that has this material, a zombie Xyz specifically, gains 1000. Kind of cute, I guess, if you can get like a game in on like turn 3. But most likely you're going to use this for the first effect. And then we have the first Xyz here, which is Pumpking the Great Ghost King. Great card is a 6 Dark Zombie Xyz. 2400 attack, 26 defense, takes 2 level 6 zombies, which, you know, you got quite a couple of those. And the Pumpking we talked about at the start immediately gives you access to that because you summon another body out of the deck and then immediately get access to this idiot. While you control Call of the Haunted, your opponent cannot target zombies you control with monster effect, which is pretty nice protection. If you do happen to, you know, end on this guy or, you know, get this guy back on the opponent's turn off of Call of the Haunted, which is a nice thing to do. Because if this guy is special summoned, you can add a Call of the Haunted or a card that mentions it from your deck to your hand. It should also search that random DM trap that counters Call of the Haunted, I believe. Call of the Grave, I think, is the name of that card. Editor me, put it up in post. And then you can also detach a material from this card and then target up to 2 cards on the field, return them to the hand. This is not a quick effect, but it's a very good removal. And since this targets any cards on the field, I think, you know, anyone who's played around the 2010s and knows what a card called Duloran, Tiger Prince of the Ice Barrier is, has maybe a slight idea on what this silly guy will get up to. Because you can just detach a material, get like, for example, this Great Mammoth back in the graveyard, and return your own Call of the Haunted to the hand, and every old head will now collectively sigh in relief, and then reset the Call of the Haunted to use it again. Feels good, man. Incredible cards. Searches on summon, removal that potentially can also double as like recursion, so to say. Incredible. Also goes well with the field spell, technically, because that has an effect on activation, which is kind of nice. But I'm getting ahead of myself here, because next up we're talking about the Undying Legion. This is not related to probably one of the most underwhelming Dark Souls 3 bosses, but a rank 7 Dark Zombie Xyz monster. 2700 attack, 0 defense, takes 2 sevens, but most likely you're losing that first line of text to summon this, because once per turn you can also Xyz summon the Undying Legion by using a rank 6 zombie Xyz you control, transferring those materials, and during the main phase you can quick effect detach 2 materials or just 1 if all the materials on this card are Xyz, and then target an attack position monster your opponent controls or 1 monster in the graveyard and attach them to this card. Great bit of disruption, something you can easily slap on a Pumpking if you're going first to get an additional bit of, you know, sealing out of your end board, which, you know, is just kind of nice. Card's just kind of great. Also seeing, like, a friend was making a joke about this, seeing Tiger Axe next to Red Eyes and Flame Swordsman as, like, these 3 Joey cards that got converted is kind of, you know, bro thinks he's on the team. But next up we have Call of the Forgotten here, which is the field spell of the stack, and this is a crazy one, because when this card is activated, you can set up to 3 Call of the Haunted from your deck and or graveyard. And if you do until the end of your opponent's next turn, you can special summon. You cannot special summon except zombies. This is the hardest lock in the deck. Will lock you out of some certain staples similar to think of Scarlet Sanguine and Eldritch a couple years back, where you can't Nibiru your opponent if you've activated, you know, Scarlet Sanguine since the tributing, and because, you know, the summon is sequential, so you can't do the first thing without the second, I believe. And then once per turn, if you activate a Call of the Haunted, you can target a monster your opponent controls and send it to the graveyard, which is another powerful layer of disruptions that has access to. Similar to the MST Archetypes trap, which is, you know, why I'm drawing a lot of parallels here, because I think this does a lot of things well, that like Radiant Typhoon and Odeon do well, where it takes like this, you know, old like series of cards, utilizes, you know, an old card in a way where it is like applicable for modern, by just giving you enough incentives to run that card. And, you know, while Call of the Haunted definitely didn't age as well as MST, I think MST is still like a perfectly fine Yu-Gi-Oh card, even if there's better alternatives. We're doing a lot here to make Call of the Haunted work, and I think it does pay off quite nicely. Next up, Ectoplasmatic Fortification here, which is a normal spell. Activate one of these effects. If you control no monsters, you can add a 6 zombie or a Call of the Forgotten from your deck to hand, which is kind of nice. I'm just a fairly like flexible rotor in that sense. Most likely just going to be something you use. to grab yourself that Pumpking here at the top, which is kind of nice. And then we have the second effect, which is if zombie monsters you control gain 400, and you can draw cards equal to the number of Call of the Haunteds you control. Maybe cute on like a follow-up turn. Could see this maybe being something where you can draw like, 2 to 3 cards on like a follow-up turn, but mainly cute for the first effect since it's a starter that way. And then we have I guess the 2 government-mandated archetypal back row cards in Vortex of Time and Deadly Zombie Breath. Vortex of Time is a quick play when your opponent activates a normal or quick play spell card or effect or a monster effect while you control a zombie and Call of the Haunted, which is a condition both of these cards have. That you need to control zombie and Call of the Haunted. Your opponent tosses a coin. The activated effect becomes either heads, your opponent must banish a monster they control, or tails, you must banish all monsters you control, because this makes the player do that thing. This does deal with towers, which is quite nice, but you gotta keep in mind while this does blank a potentially devastating normal or quick play spell or monster effect. This can also banish a monster you control, and you don't want your monsters banished. You want them right there in the graveyard, which is why I personally do prefer the second card here, Deadly Zombie Breath, to this if you are playing one of the archetypal back rows. Normal trap, if you control a zombie and a Call of the Haunted, you target a monster your opponent controls, send it to the grave. Pretty straight and simple. Second effect here is if you control a zombie, you can banish this from the graveyard and then target a face-up card you control and a face-up card your opponent controls, send both to the graveyard. Also pretty straightforward. Just a, simple bit of removal on top of your board. Maybe something cool for going first if you have like a bit of redundancy in hand and can get to this as well as, your Call of the Haunted. But yeah, with that out of the way, I'll be swapping over to DB, and then we can talk about how these cards look in a deck list as of now. But yeah, looking at a deck list now. Again, a couple of things still up in the air. I'm going to talk about those when I get to those cards. In general, maxing out on Pumpking, this is like your main guy, so makes sense to max out on that. Similar vein, we're maxing out on all the other starters, which are, Stay of the Snake Hair, the Unizombies, the Glow Up Blooms, and the Ectoplasmatic Fortifications. For the normal summons, I would like to personally shout out Jacob Guy. Just gonna refer to you as Jacob. I assume that is okay. Really helped me out finding out that Glow Up Bloom is a card that exists, and upon rereading, Unizombie does indeed not discard for cost. I thought this guy discarded for cost, which is something I was worried about because I did not want this deck to be like super weak in the hand traps, but it doesn't, which is kind of nice. So yeah, Glow Up Bloom kind of ties this deck very nicely together, because did you guys know this card can grab any high-level zombie and not just Doom King Bela Drogue? It's impressive that I forgot this card existed, because I did get the structure deck at one point in time. But here we are. Yeah, great card. If it's sent to grave, banish it, add a 5 or higher zombie, and life's good. Life's good. You're locked in the zombies for the rest of the turn, but who the fuck cares? You're playing a zombie deck. And zombie is also just a great typing, which is, yeah, something easily forgotten, I think, in the modern day and age. Due to like how long this types existed and how much like good cards zombies have gotten over the years. If there's a good zombie archetype, probably going to be very happy about that typing. Yeah, playing one Army of the Haunted, just a one-off extender you can, in some combos get in some combos, especially the Uni-Zombie lines, need to get into rotation. Otherwise, yeah, it's just an extender, really. Even fairly searchable at that, since it also is able to be grabbed off of, Ectoplasmatic Fortification, which technically is grabbable by Stay of the Snake here, which, pretty good to have that bit of redundancy. Great Mammoth in Netherworld, also a one-off, I think. There's no need to play more of these. You get it into rotation once, resummon it off a Call of the Haunted all the time, and keep popping cards every turn. Yeah, Unizombie, as mentioned, makes himself a 4, dumps the Glow Up Bloom. Glow Up Bloom is then a starter. Life's good, and Glow Up Bloom is something you can easily link off into, freshly unbanned Link Rebo. Or I believe this was the previous ban list and not the most recent one. or Relinquished Anima if your opponent plays into that going second, which is something to keep in mind. Call of the Forgotten is still like something I think need to. I'm playing the third just out of like, if you draw it, you draw it. But I think you can definitely make a case for 2 here. 3 active plasmatic fortification, as mentioned, because it's a starter. And then, you know, back in my day, I didn't have to think about Call of the Haunted ratios because that shit was limited. But nowadays, we are in the fortunate position to discuss if it's 1, 2, or 3 Call of the Haunted. I believe in 3, not only because Call of the Haunted is good to draw in this deck, realistically. If you can get, like, any of these into rotation, especially Stare of the Snake here, is very easy to get into rotation because it discards itself for cost. Or Call of the Forgotten alongside it, you're already sitting on Disruption, which is kind of what this deck like wants to do, and also I think excels at. It's very easy to produce Disruption in this deck. And if you don't really get disrupted or drawn, it is also easy to produce a lot of Disruption in this deck. And just keep overwhelming your opponent with those undead hordes. On the topic of like undead hordes, talking about like a bit of the nonsense you can also do with this deck. I think if you want to play one of these, you side it in going first. Mainly just to have more hand trap space if you don't know which side of the coin you're on. And also because you're not always getting to it in a combo. You do have quite a bit of redundancy if you draw additional engine pieces, but not as much to where it's like, okay, I can always afford to, you know, get this thing in, you know, a turn 1 combo. You can play like this this Ghost Fusion thing, searchable of a Ghost Wyvern to maybe make like a Duke of the Mice if you want to get like that bit much more gas in. Talked about Jiangxi earlier, just a great, you know, body to have if you, you know, can get Banishing, or, you know, for example, something like a Curse of the Ancient Turtle, which is also like a pretty decent card. This guy exists. This guy also exists. This guy is maybe like a bit better than the previous one in this deck specifically, because there's just a lot more initial synergy, and if you want to like shave a field spell for a Baylor Drogue, I think that's also perfectly fine to do. You can play this card once you probably like a set amount of games just off of activating it going first. Ether Barrel is here because I think he's cool, and had to sadly find out that there is not a 6 vanilla zombie, which is unfortunate. Move the bell down here for some recent adjustments. And this, I think, is also an interesting card for this deck, because I do think that outside of, like, the Pumpking Disease, the Undying Legion, the Zombie Dragon Lord, and then, like, I guess SP, the Link ones, and then, like, maybe Vampire Sucker, there's not really, like, that many crucial slots in the extra deck, and even then, like, SP is fairly cuttable. If you have like one of the Link ones, you're kind of fine. So you can maybe modify this to where like extra fits the bill, but this deck's already weak enough in the draw as is. But extra is just a neat option to have, I think. 2 of the Great Ghost King, 2 of the Undying Legion, a Sheridan, which is just interesting removal going second. Wallow, just a potentially good end board piece. Typhon to help with sticky game states. And this guy, also once again, shout out to Jacob. A lot of the zombie synchros usually had this issue of they're not directly disruptions. Zombie Dragonlord, because it's a quick effect reborn in this deck, is a disruption, which is very nice. And since this idiot also just like returns himself to the field while you have zombies in the grave, which you will have a lot of zombies in the grave, technically you're playing 1 here. That's also just easy to banish for this. Great cards. Just absolutely great cards, honestly. This is here because on occasion you can probably make it. This could probably also be like a second Vampire Sucker if you feel like it. That's a Fascinator in here, SP, Sucker. Flying Mary is interesting removal, initially intended for Eldritch, but because we're playing like so many high-level zombies, you can also make great use of this. This places itself as a continuous spell in the spell and trap zone, and when it is a continuous spell, you can target a 5 or higher zombie and destroy a monster your opponent controls with attack less than or equal to that monster. These are like okay-ish sized, so like can come up. But yeah, for the Link ones, the 1 Link Reborn Anima, just in case you're going second, your opponent plays into it. But with all that out of the way, I think we'll quickly take a look at like a couple example combos. Well, we're starting off simple yet strong. This is basically the, like, I guess, standard Call of the Haunted combo, I'd call it. This basically just requires you to get to Pumpking. For that, it's important to keep in mind that ectoplasmatic fortification, Stare of the Snake Hair because it gets you to ectoplasmatic fortification, and also Glow Up Bloom get you to this line if you open them. You just need to link off the Glow Up Bloom first, and these two are, just search the other, and this searches the Pumpking. So that's maybe, something to keep in mind for this. You do have an ample amount of copies. These are 12 copies in total, which I'd say gives you a pretty good chance to open this. I think maybe in post I'll put up like a number on the screen that I've pulled out of my ass. You're going to start by revealing the Pumpkin in your hand, which does allow you to set a Call of the Haunted into your spell and trap zone, which is immediately able to be activated. You are then forced to discard the Pumpkin. And as mentioned earlier, since this is immediately able to be activated again, you can also use it to return the Pumpkin immediately, which on summon will trigger, to then get you another zombie out of the deck here. I do like to get the Great Mammoth of the Netherworld into rotation, which we are then going to take those two, immediately overlaying those into the Pumpkin Xyz, which on summon triggers to add a Call of the Haunted or a card that mentions it from our deck to our hand, which handily enough is Stare of the Snake Hair. We are then going to use Pumpking the Great Ghost King to declare that effect, detach the Mammoth, target on Call of the Haunted, and it feels good, doesn't it? This just feels good, like incredibly good. Can then, of course, do that also later. Use the Snake Hair here to grab ourselves that Call of the Forgotten. We can rank up our Pumpkin into the Undying Legion, activate Call of the Forgotten, which on activation will set us copies 2 and 3 of Call of the Haunted, and then we can set our last remaining copy. If we were to pass turn here, what are we realistically looking at? We have the Undying Legion, which can detach 2 materials from this card, and then target an attack position monster the opponent controls or a monster in their graveyard and attaches that to itself, which is, a pretty decent piece of removal. Call of the Forgotten can send a monster the opponent controls once we activate any of the 3 Call of the Haunteds. And the Call of the Haunteds themselves, if they happen to bring back a Stare of the Snake Hair or Great Mammoth of the Netherworld, also give us access to a negate. That also blanks that monster's usage for extra deck summons and a pop, which, this is like every Call of the Haunted here is essentially a disruption. So this is like, 3-4 pieces of disruption off of 1 card, which kind of crazy realistically. But yeah, this is, I'd say, like the bread and butter combo of this deck. I think this is just in the Nibiru range, I want to say. Pumpking summon number 1, the one from deck is summon number 2. The Xyz Pumpking is your summon number 3. And the Undying Legion is summon number 4, exactly. So this does play under Nibiru. If you're starting this line with Glow Up Bloom, Undying Legion exactly is your 5th summon. So that's maybe something to keep in mind if you want to respect that card. Because realistically, just sitting on the Pumpkin also isn't the worst thing in the universe. Because you've probably still got these 2 in rotation in the graveyard as disruptions and still have your field spell. But that's, something for you to consider on the fly. With that, let's look at a line that uses Unizombie as a starter. Well, here we are again, Unizombie in hand. We're going to go ahead and normal summon that Unizombie, use the effect to target itself to increase its level by 1. If that were to resolve, we can send the handy dandy Glow Up Bloom from our deck to the graveyard, which is going to trigger, banish, get banished, and then add a 5 or higher zombie from our deck to hand, which is going to be Pumpking the King of Grave Ghosts. From here, this is going to look familiar, revealing the Pumpking here. Not yet. Wrong button. Going to get a Call of the Haunted in our spell and trap zone, and then discard the Pumpking. We can then use that Call of the Haunted. Skip the set here. You obviously set this immediately. Can flip it, of course, for the Pumpking. And the Pumpking here is going to, and there's something I talked about in the deck profile, grab us the Army of the Haunted. Which, since the Unizombie is now a 4, we can use this 4 and the 6 here. To get access to Red Eyes, Zombie, Dragon Lord. And since we have a Call of the Haunted on the field, the Army of the Haunted can return to the field, which we can then immediately overlay with the Pumpking into the Pumpking Xyz, which, you know, we're familiar, you know, I know royalty. If you want to skip a step here, you can obviously also immediately grab Call of the Forgotten. It's just less disruption that way. But we're going greedy today, grabbing Stay of the Snake Hair here, which we are then going to declare. We are going to discard, and then we are going to grab ourselves that Call of the Forgotten. If you would have already drawn like a Stay of the Snake or Call of the Forgotten, and if you were going first, this is usually where you would be grabbing your back row if you can. So that's, you know, something to keep in mind. We can then, you know, still go Pumpking here. You know, I think it's good to just get Pumpking into rotation, because that way you also have the option to get Great Mammoth out of your deck on the opponent's turn. To, you know, once again, target Call of the Haunted, return that boy to the hand, you know, get that free value in. We're so far into the Bureau range by now, it is absolutely ridiculous to care. Call of the Forgotten gets activated here and is immediately setting us Call of the Haunted 2 and 3. And we can also set the third one again. Yeah, what are we once again looking at? We have the classic, you know, we have all of the Call of the Haunted, which immediately, or like not necessarily immediately, but do provide us with a disruption either through the field spell or through what we summon. Since we have a Stay of the Snake Hair in the grave and also Pumpking. Because if we were to summon back the Pumpking off of a Call of the Haunted, the Pumpking would trigger and give us access to the Great Mammoth of the Netherworld. So that's, you know, something to keep in mind if you're building your end boards in this deck. Red Eye Zombie Dragon Lord does fit in quite nicely into this end board, because this is another revival for a zombie monster. So in a case where you would have used your Undying Legion already, so for example had detached both materials from it, to, you know, steal an opponent's monster from their field or from their graveyard, you could use the Red Eye Zombie Dragon Lord, of course, as something, a way to bring you a disruption back instead of the Snake Hair, or, you know, do the Pumpking for Netherworld guy thing. But you can also very easily bring back the Pumpking, the Great Ghost King, and since the effect to search triggers on summon, this is a very easy way to ensure you have follow-up. And also get some protection in for your board, because chances are you're probably going to have one of these Call of the Haunted face up on the field, so your opponent cannot target the zombie monsters you control while monster effects, which, you know, might come in handy once or twice. I've heard that this Draco Tail deck does target with monster effects, you know, Gulamel and Arthalion, if they wanna remove guys from the board, usually have to target. Yes, this does get outed by Malulu and Pan, but a man can dream. Something cool that I did not touch on in the deck profiles or the combos much is that the normal summons in this deck do not clash. These do work even if you draw both, which is kind of nice. Because if you happen to, you know, normal the Unizombie effect to dump from the deck, usually you would be dumping Bloom, which, you know, makes a lot of sense. But in this situation, you can technically also choose to just send like the Mammoth in the graveyard, which you would usually not in the line. Because then you can use the first effect of the Unizombie to then discard the Bloom, increase its level again, which would make it normally a 5. If the first effect to send from the deck gets like ashed, for example, you're just gonna like use the first effect again and then play usually. If you're playing this line like very greedily, as I have here, because this is very weak to like Veiler or Imperm potentially, you can then, you know, bloom, do the bloom thing. We're going to assume we're playing this like a greedy idiot. Getting the Mammoth into rotation for free. Grabbing Pumpking here. We'd be revealing Pumpking. Get Call of the Haunted. Discard Pumpking. Call. Summon back the King. King here for the... Where is it? The Army of the Haunted. Since it's a 5, you don't have an extra deck option, so technically at this point you'd be making a Link 2 in Vampire Sucker, which then gets you a bit of value because you can use the Army of the Haunted to bring them back, which does trigger the Vampire Sucker, which is quite nice, and it just gives you, you know, a random draw in the middle of the line. From here on out, you know, I think you're all seeing the writing on the wall. You know, you're overlaying into Pumpkin the Great Ghost King, and from here you're going essentially the same way, you know, the line usually plays out. So there's like a slightly greedier line, but like a line that like makes drawing both normals like slightly less awkward. Not going to play this thing out because you've already seen it. But this is just something I felt like pointing out that, you know, makes the whole normal summon setup not as bad if you like, you know, happen to draw both. With all that off the way, once again, huge thanks to Jacob. You were incredibly helpful in like pulling this all together. Because I just absolutely fucking forgot that Glow Bloom existed. So huge kudos to you if you're hearing this. And to the rest of you, what are your thoughts on this, like, you know, Call of the Haunted, Bonz, Pumpking deck? God, this is going to be a nightmare naming against similar to Odeon. Let me know down in the comments below what your thoughts are. I'd be interested to hear. Again, as mentioned in that long-ass community post, uploads are probably going to be rare, but this is something that I did want to talk about because I think it's very cool. And I think in a similar vein, if something like this happens, I will upload and talk about it. But yeah, with all of that out of the way, I'll be thanking you guys very much for watching. I'll be seeing you guys again, hopefully soon. So yeah, until then, goodbye.